So friends, welcome back to KU Padasala. We are discussing film studies. Now, film is known by different names. Cinema, film, movies. So for me, whenever I approach cinema and try to look at its multiple dimensions, these three names come in handy. So for me, cinema can mean an art, a political stand, an implication, an aesthetics. Cinema can mean technology. Without technology, there is no cinema. And then the third part, which is the industry. Cinema is one art which cannot exist without the commercial industry. So for me, the aesthetic and the artistic elements of cinema can be called as cinema, while the technology could be termed as film, and the industry could be termed using the word movies. These are tentative terms used for a perspective into understanding cinema. So let us now look into the technology of cinema, the history of the technology of cinema that has gone through tremendous amount of change through the last 100 odd years and become what it is today. So, the story of film isn't just about one person. It's a collaborative masterpiece. Think of it as the Avengers of the art world. Avengers assemble with investors joining in, with inventors joining forces, each contributing to the grand tapestry of cinema. Now, picture this. It's 1895. The Lumiere brothers released Train Arriving at a Station. You've got workers, a train, and a camera that captures it all. This film, my dear friends, marks a turning point, a cinematic Big Bang, if you will. But wait, our story's roots run even deeper. It's the 16th century, and we have got magic lanterns creating moving photographs. Now let's talk pioneers. George Méliès, Edwin S. Potter. These folks have wild imagination, think sci-fi, fantasy, and even a dash of comedy. They're the artists who started weaving stories into the magic world. Each of these films, these early films, were short and perhaps sweet. Actualities, as they were called, cinema of actualities, for the folks in penny arcades. But then came the narrative format. Picture larger audience, diverse scenes, and filmmakers shouting, "We want more." Now fast forward to Hollywood. Yes, that Hollywood. In the early 1900s, a wave of creative minds from Adolf Zucker to Charlie Chaplin laid the foundation for the film industry as we know it. Then there is D.W. Griffith, the maestro behind the birth of a nation. Although the film is notorious for its racist content, it is still a technical and artistic marvel. Griffith was like the conductor leading cinema into the modern age. So friends, lights, camera, action. Our journey through the evolution of moving pictures begin here. We are diving deep into the world of cinematic innovation. Now rewind to 19th century, where moving images were more of a distant dream. It was a British photographer, Edward Muybridge, who kicked things into gear. Now imagine this. A bet on racehorses gallop led to a groundbreaking experiment that involved 24 cameras and a whole lot of strings. You see, Governor Leland Stanford wasn't just horsing around. He wagered that all four hooves of a racing horse left the ground during a run. So Muybridge captured the action with 24 synchronized cameras. It was like the Matrix of the 19th century. Muybridge's dedication didn't stop there. He took these photos and turned them into magic, literally. He mounted the images on a phenakistoscope and used a magical lantern to project them. But it didn't end there. Muybridge's inventions kept evolving. In 1879, he introduced the supraxiscope, a device that could project these images into motion. It was like he had unlocked the secret of bringing still pictures to life. The 19th century was a hotbed of innovation. With Emile Raynaud's praxinoscope in 1882 and Etienne Jules Marey's incredible invention, the Marey's camera captured 12 photos in a single second. And now that is what we call a snapshot. In this whirlwind of creativity, the man himself, Thomas Edison, stepped into the spotlight in 1888. Inspired by Muybridge and Marey, he dreamt of combining visuals with sound, a pioneer in the making. And just when you thought the stage was set, George Eastman introduced celluloid film for Kodak cameras in 1889. It was a page borrowed from inventor Hannibal Goodwin's books. This was the birth of film as we know it. And now, dear viewers, we find ourselves at a crossroad of cinematic history where visionaries of both sides of Atlantic were pioneering motion pictures. Across the ocean in France, the inventive spirit of Louis-Émile Prince was in full swing. Trained under the great Daguerre, he embarked on a journey that would forever change the world. But the path to cinema was filled with twists and turns. In 1888, Le Prince began exposing paper negatives in his father-in-law's garden. These were the humble beginnings of what we now call motion pictures. But here is where it gets interesting. Le Prince, like many pioneers, faced financial constraints. So he packed his inventions and his dreams and set off for New York City, where he planned to showcase his films. The sad twist? He mysteriously vanished on the way, a riddle that remains unsolved even to this day. Meanwhile, on the American soil, another genius was making cinematic history, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. Inspired by celluloid film, embarked on his own odyssey. Dixon realized that light held the key to motion pictures. He cut celluloid film sheets into strips, added perforations, and a touch of genius created the first ever motion picture film. What's more, he gave birth to the kinetoscope, a device that allowed viewers to peek into this world of moving images. It was an invention that would change the course of history. Enter the Monkey Shines trilogy, filmed between 1889 and 1890, hot on the heels of Louis-Émile Prince's works. It was Edison and Dixon who stole the spotlight. In May 1891, they unveiled the kinetoscope to the National Federation of Women's Clubs. The star of the show, none other than Dixon himself, tipping his hat to the world, a cinematic nod to the future. And then there was Fred Ott's Sneeze, shot in 1891 but officially copyrighted in 1894. It was a time of intense innovation, a race to patent motion picture cameras and viewers. The battle for patents raged on, and Edison aimed to patent the very essence of the movie camera, sparking years of legal battles. The early days of cinema were a roller coaster ride, much like the films that we see these days, filled with creativity, rivalry, and legal drama. But they set the stage for the dazzling world of motion pictures we adore today. As we look back, let's not forget the unsung heroes like Louis-Émile Prince, who despite the odds secured patents for his inventions in multiple countries. Their determination and ingenuity were the building blocks of this cinematic world. Across the English Channel, Wordsworth Donisthorpe and William Carcroft unveiled their kinesograph in 1890, adding more threads to the cinematic tapestry. It was an era of boundless innovation and competition. Now fast forward to the cinematic renaissance of 1894 and 1896, the invention and patenting of motion picture cameras and projectors in 1891 set the stage for a seismic leap in the film industry. The floodgates of creativity burst open. Herman Castell's mutoscope Nickelodeon, George Gemini's biography camera, and Edward Muybridge's unrelenting explorations with the supraxiscope pushed the boundaries of technology and art. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Edison and Dixon were building the first film studios in 1893, the Black Maria as it is known. Nestled in the heart of New Jersey, this unassuming studio became the birthplace of cinematic studio production. Between 1894 and 1896, a cinematic revolution swept the world. Edison's vision led to the opening of kinetoscope parlors in New York City by April 1894. These parlors became sensations, drawing patrons from all walks of life. For a mere 5 to 25 cents, eager viewers could experience mesmerizing peep shows. The offerings ranged from music hall sequences to comic sketches, historical reenactments, and even thrilling boxing matches. Lumiere means light. The Lumiere brothers weren't just filmmakers. They were pioneers who illuminated the path for the world of cinema. The journey was just beginning. As the Lumiere brothers' films took the world by storm, something exciting was brewing on the other side of the Atlantic. In the United States, Thomas Edison and William Kennedy Laureate Dixon were cooking up cinematic history of their own. The Industrial Revolution's wind touched every aspect of life, and the battle for patents grew fierce as innovators sought to protect their creations. Edison, in particular, aimed to secure the patent for the fundamental mechanism of movie camera, igniting years of legal battles. So the early days of cinema were a mix of creativity, rivalry, and intrigue, paving the way for the dazzling world of motion pictures we enjoy today. Now let's journey to a moment that became the stuff of legend. It was 1895 when Lumiere brothers unveiled arrival of a train at La Ciotat station. This seemingly ordinary film capturing a train rushing towards a station had an extraordinary impact. The story goes that the audience were so enthralled that they thought the train truly burst through the scene. Of course, it's a myth. But perhaps the audience, who then were very much used to different kinds of projecting devices, would have marveled at this new invention and this new innovation. And they would have made sounds of happiness. People fainted, ducked, and screamed, a truly cinematic spectacle ahead of its times. What made this film remarkable was Lumiere brothers' unique camera angle selection. They shifted from the distant shots to close-ups, ushering in a new era of directorial influence over the camera's perspective, as opposed to a passive observer. But the Lumiere brothers didn't stop there. They ventured into the uncharted waters with The Sprinkler Sprinkled, a playful dramatization, a comedy. This marked the first public projection of a fully fictional style film, unlocking the doors to creativity and humor. Now let's uncover an often overlooked chapter in cinematic history. Major Woodville Latham, in May 1895, projected a boxing match in New York City using his idoloscope, which he co-invented with none other than William Dixon, a former Edison employee. The Lathams and the idoloscope were setting the stage for the cinema's next leap. In the midst of the cinematic surge, the Latham family made a bold move by doubling the width of the film to 70 mm, delivering a crisper and a more vivid image. Their innovative Latham loop technique, still used in modern cameras and projectors, ensured motion pictures without film tearing. And this was very, very important. Meanwhile, Edison was in hot pursuit. In 1895, his collaboration with Thomas Armat and Francis Charles Jenkins gave birth to the phantoscope. The result? The grand premiere of the Vitascope in April 1896 in the heart of New York City. Edison aimed to replicate the Lumiere brothers' success, shifting his focus towards actualities similar to their work. Spectators were once again thrilled by the films like A Rough Sea at Dover. Edison's journey to captivate audience have begun, driven by innovation and competition. Now the year is 1896. The world is witnessing the explosive birth of movies. It's a time when films were novelties and experiments, with the contours of the film industry still taking shape. Audience worldwide couldn't get enough of the latest projection machines. The demand for this new form of entertainment was insatiable, igniting a competitive frenzy among inventors. While New York City was at the heart of cinematic innovations, theaters were mushrooming across the United States and in European cities like Paris, Brussels, and London. Filmmakers were pushing the boundaries of cinematic expression. A multitude of filmmakers were exploring new techniques and styles. Emile Reynaud dabbled in animated pictures. Charles and Emile Path delved into color film. And George Méliès whisked audience into a realm of fantasy and science fiction. Thomas Edison faced formidable rivals in the United States in his quest for cinematic dominance. James Stewart Blackton and Albert Smith launched the Vitagraph Company of America. They began with films showcasing vaudeville acts, but soon transformed into journalists during the Spanish-American War, capturing early versions of newsreels. These newsreels sometimes blurred the line between documentation and dramatization, leaning more towards propaganda. The American Mutoscope and Biograph Company entered the scene in 1896, initially producing flip cards for mutoscope machines. However, the game changer was Edison's former employee, William Dixon. With Dixon's entry, they rebranded Biograph, producing higher quality films that rival even the Lumiere brothers. Legal disputes unfolded. Edison succeeded in effectively sidelining Biograph from the market by 1897. The movie industry was taking its first steps towards becoming the powerhouse we know today. The year is 1897. The cinematic landscape is experiencing fascinating twists. As competing projectors entered the scene, a surprising shift occurred. The Lumieres, who stood tall alongside Edison in the cinematic revolution, found themselves facing unexpected challenges. In 1897, Lumiere had to shut down their American operations due to threat from US customs officials. By 1898, their film production mysteriously halted despite having an extensive catalogue of over 2,000 films by 1903. In 1905, the company took an unexpected turn, focused solely on still photography. Amidst these changes, a remarkable newcomer entered the stage. The French magician Georges Méliès. Drawing inspiration from Edison's and Lumiere's works, Méliès made a significant impact. Méliès was notably influenced by Edison's 1895 film, The Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, directed by Alfred Clark. This film used a simple but innovative editing technique, replacing an actor with a dummy mid-shot. It sparked Méliès' imagination and set him on a cinematic journey. Méliès, a pioneer in special effects, incorporated his stage illusions into the films. In The Vanishing Lady in 1896, he used camera stops to replace a woman with a skeleton. He infused fantasy, science fiction, horror, and dark comedy into cinema. He uses different techniques like parallel screen, matting to put across or to create magic in reels. Filmmakers like Méliès sparked a cinematic revolution. The rapid development of film technology opened the door to film as an art form. Initially, films were candid, unscripted glimpses of life, but Méliès and others elevated them with creative storytelling and pioneering special effects. Méliès was a master of splicing, editing, and superimposition, creating surreal and otherworldly visions. These in-camera editing techniques were the features of the early days of cinema. The early days of cinema were a fertile ground for artistic growth, and Méliès was a trailblazer. In 1902, Georges Méliès took audiences on A Trip to the Moon, loosely based on Jules Verne's novel, a mesmerizing adventure. Meanwhile, in 1903, Edwin S. Potter made his mark with two Groundbreaking films, The Life of an American Fireman, blended actuality and fiction, pushing the boundaries of temporal continuity. The film stirred controversy with its 13 crosscuts depicting the fireman and the tenants. Initially, Potter's edits were different, but his innovative approach marked a milestone in cinema's evolution. And speaking of innovation, let's not forget James Williamson's Fire in 1901, and also used overlapping action, paving the way for storytelling techniques. At the end of 1903, Potter unleashed The Great Train Robbery, a trailblazing film that established the Western genre and set the stage for narrative cinema. Introducing in itself parallel editing, Great Train Robbery was an extraordinary film for the times. This film immersed viewers in the action thanks to creative camera angles and dynamic storytelling. It's often hailed as the world's first blockbuster. In the early 1900s, we also witnessed emotional connections through films like Cecil Hepworth's Rescued by River. It tugged at the heartstrings of an audience. In England, the Brighton School filmmakers, including James Williamson and George Albert Smith, were pioneering new techniques. Point-of-view shots, close-ups, and moving cameras set the stage for future filmmakers. And now let's not forget D.W. Griffith, who built upon these foundations, shaping the future of cinema. But amidst this creative explosion, film industry was rife with competition and legal battles. Thomas Edison was at the center of many legal challenges during cinema's formative years.